Ladies and gentlemen, it's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guest we have Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Yes, it's always my pleasure. First of all, the news what I just got that Ukrainian Rada, which is a parliament, they approved the mineral deal. So this is done and over with, and
It's apparently a better deal for Ukraine than was originally proposed, about a month or two ago. So
it's not just better; it's a different deal in many components. It's the only thing is that the both deals are being called a mineral deal, but there is a miles of differences between the first deal when it was just proposed and the final one that was signed. We are not going to go into details.
No.
People who follow this subject, they are aware of difference between the first and the
but the main thing to take away is that it's working out much better for Ukraine than was originally thought.
Yeah, all that's going without saying. Now about this Russian proposal for a peace, 3 days peace. They are Ukraine never agreed to that to begin with because it's a farce. And guess what? Russians are continue their bombardment of civilians and children and so on. It's just going on, and this is now I start to feel really sorry for Trump because he, with his life experience as a businessman, he just can't understand Putin's thinking. When Trump was offering almost anything, but Putin even never asked him for, he was laying it, we will give you this, and that, and Crimea is yours.
And Sasha, for the first time in his life, President Trump has confronted a leader with a completely alien mindset, completely out of anything he has ever experienced, someone who is not willing to make a deal. He is not willing to compromise in the sense that Westerners are used to, meeting the other person halfway. As you know, the Russians translate their word for compromise, which they borrowed from English. They translate it as mutual surrender. And to the Russian mindset, that their version of compromise is absolutely distasteful. They will not stand for a leader who insists on compromising. So that to them shows weakness. And so therefore, that explains why the Russians continue to make these maximalist demands, which amount to nothing less than unconditional surrender on the part of the West. And so therefore, Trump is experiencing a Jimmy Carter moment, much when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. He is realizing the true evil nature of the opponent that he is faced with, someone that totally rejects his way of thinking. And so we are also seeing signs that President Trump is starting to react in a manner similar to the way that President Carter reacted afterwards. Yeah, as you know, President Carter boycotted the Moscow Olympics, slapped a grain embargo on the Soviets, and most crucially, initiated the major defense buildup that all Ronald Reagan had to do when he came into office was step on the accelerator. So we can hope that there are going to be signs of this reflected in the Trump administration's future actions in the coming months and hopefully years.
What I can say about coming back to a question of Trump's hopes for a quick peace between Russia and Ukraine, I think where he get fundamentally wrong and probably now realize that he was talking about the deal. So for him, this was a business transaction. Okay, so you're fighting in Ukraine, you want this and that and that. And maybe you will get it, maybe not. Now, what I'm offering you instead is considerable business opportunities that you while exploring it and while acting on that, you will lose your interest. Ukraine fighting for these territories, when there is nothing really could be solved, and it's not even sure that you will achieve your goals simply from military
And
perspective.
the crucial difference, Sasha, is that President Trump is thinking in terms of economics,
Yeah.
and President Putin is thinking in terms of empire, reestablishing an empire.
Well, now
And,
that's a very interesting question. You see, the economics, it's a changeable figure. It could be today this and tomorrow that, or vice versa. It could reverse or so on. Now, empire, in at least in Putin's mind, it's something what you have or you don't have. So if you have empire, you can then work on economics. You can do something. You can
you can
improve.
exploit resources, you can extract resources, and so
Absolutely,
forth.
you have something to work with. Now, you don't have empire, you have economic problems, you're done. There is
Yep.
nothing to fight for. So I think Trump, by emphasizing the deal side of that process, he oversimplified the nature of the conflict, and he didn't look into history except what his
Apparently neither did his advisors.
absolutely. So he was listening to so what's his name, Vitkov, when he was in Russia. Well, Putin was telling him stories about Pechenegi and Polovtsy and all these things happened 1,000 years ago.
And
Well,
it went completely over his head.
no, but the thing is that 1,000 years ago, during the Pechenegi and the Poles, there was no Moscow Empire, there was no Moscovia. It didn't even exist at that time. So he is talking about history of the Kievan Rus. So this
Right.
is completely wrong. So Vitskov, if he would have any brains, he would say, wait a moment, Mr. Putin, but I thought that it was you're telling us history of Kiev, the kingdom. You're not talking about Russian or Muscovy at all because it didn't exist. Where were Muscovy in 1,000 years ago at the time of Polovts and Pechenegi? Where was that? Give me at least one example that would say that when this even the all the written documents at that time, and there are not too many of them, but those few are important. They're talking about Kiev and the Rus only. They don't talk about anything outside of Kiev. So you have
Well,
now.
it's like that the one story I told you about where this Russian general was asked by his American counterpart what he thought was the most beautiful city in all of Russia, and his response was Kiev. So that tells you everything you want to know about the Russian mindset.
Yeah.
They're very they cannot imagine in their from their perspective, they cannot imagine an independent Ukraine totally separate from and independent of Russia. They see it as an inseparable part of the Russian Empire.
Okay, so here we come to a real, in my opinion, reason for Putin's war and attempts to destroy Ukraine and just wipe it out from the earth. The reason is that if Kiev is independent, the Ukraine, I mean, and Moscow has nothing to do with the history of Ukraine, history of Kiev. So all Russian history is that they were destroyed by Mongols. They were Mongols. Actually, they could have been called Mongols instead of Russians or European Mongols. Okay, that's that's the best probably where they could go. And they have no history of Kiev, no history of Kiev union with Lithuania and Poland, and it was one of the strongest, if not the strongest, kingdom in Middle Ages. In fact, they destroyed a German army near Grunwald. And with that, Russia has nothing to do with that. Russia, they had to go to Mongol Tsars, or what's it called, Khans, to ask so-called Yerlik. It means the right to rule. So every Russian knyaz or König or Tsar, before he became a Tsar, he had to go to a Golden Orda. He had to get Yarlik the right to become a ruler. Then he would come back, and then how he would become a Tsar of Russia. Nothing of that happened in Kiev, in Ukraine. Ukrainians never had to go to Mongols asking for right to do this or that. So Kiev and Ukraine has European traditions. It's a European country, and Russia is Asian country, and there was never is going to be reconciliation between those two. And
And
Putin
that is a fundamental difference, which fortunately the nations of Europe realize they have a better historical sense collectively than certainly than the United States has, at least in certain elements. And so therefore, that is why it is much easier for European nations to get behind Ukraine, because they realize collectively that it is in their best enlightened self-interest to support Ukraine, stop Russian aggression there, throw it back if at all possible, defeat it, make sure that they are beaten decisively, because now the Russians are approaching that somewhat magical casualty level of over 1 million casualties.
Yeah, it's getting there.
And that's you remember what Joseph Stalin said. He says he once said, "One death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is only a statistic."
Yeah, and the Russian women will get another million babies, and
they're going to be busy, shall we say?
yeah, I suspect that the majority of the fathers of these new babies will be Chinese.
Oh yeah, we're going to get a lot of hybrids, a lot of mixing of the gene pool,
Yeah, so then will become a question of having referendums in Siberia, and most of the Siberians will become Chinese Siberians.
It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess, no matter how you look at it. And basically, all that we can do in the West is make sure that Ukraine is both economically and militarily strengthened, so that they can, I suspect, after the current Trump administration, and probably in the way trends are going, in a subsequent Republican administration, depending on who Trump's successor in the White House would be, which is very, very strong likelihood, given the current array of political forces, that the Republicans will continue on after the current administration, and some continuation, while there will be some continuation of Trump's policies, there will also be more of an openness to say if Ukraine continues its economic and military buildup and recovery, that they would be more welcome or amenable to having Ukraine join NATO. The United States will not seriously object to Ukraine joining NATO at that point, particularly if Russia, after the conclusion of this war, is in the throes of its own economic turmoil resulting from its severe demographic problems. They've always had bad demographic problems resulting from the Second World War, which carried into most of the Cold War. But also they will have severe economic demographic problems, just a host of problems that will come home and haunt Russia for, I would say, much of the rest of the 21st century.
You know, what's interesting is I'm going to Europe in about a week and a half.
Okay.
One of the countries that I'm going to visit is Riga, Latvia.
Oh my, okay.
I was watching a lot of programs lately about Baltic states, and Latvia included. And one of this program was about how Baltic states are preparing to war with Russia. And what's interesting is that they have, first of all, they have a lot of advisors from NATO countries like Germany, UK, and they're having all the drills daily and exercises, military exercises, of course. And their doctrine is uh, as soon as if and when this Russian invasion, so-called, would start, they want to immediately to switch the fighting on the Russian territory. So their doctrine is not to allow any fighting happen on the Baltic Prime territory, but
You mean preemptively invade?
uh, not preemptively, but as soon as there will be obvious signs of Russian
Right.
invasion, then push immediately to have all the fighting on the Russian territory, not to have any fighting on the Baltic Prime territory.
Yeah, they
That's
would be,
interesting.
and that's very interesting because that implicitly would count upon support from other NATO nations, and in particular, Ukraine in particular, because if Ukraine backs them up and provides them with support that basically would anchor it. There would have to be to make that kind of an approach work for the Baltic states. They could not, hopefully, they could not do it in isolation. Obviously, they would have to have uh, some at least secret agreements that would not be brought out in public, obviously, but that would be contingency plans that would be triggered by their invasion of Russian territory, so that the other states, such as Finland, other states bordering Russia, would be able to support and distract and provide a major diversion for Russian forces trying to counter an invasion of the Baltic states. It would be very complicated, but it would greatly complicate Russia's plans. And given the fact that Russia has never had, and certainly will not have for the foreseeable future, a respectable or reliable logistics capability to sustain offensive operations. The moment anything goes wrong with their offensive plans, if it relies on virtually no opposition, it has a chance. But even then, with their questionable logistics system, if they run into any kind of prolonged resistance or any kind of situation to which they have to react to an unexpected development, they are in trouble. So, go ahead.
John, I think that the main question is: are they, if to invade Baltic states, is it going to be while continue its war in Ukraine? That reminds me now what Germany did while fighting England. They went to attack Russia, and eventually they were encircled from the east and the west, and it was a absolutely losing situation. Just
And even from Italy, you'll recall, when they
absolutely.
they were surrounded from all
So
sides.
how Putin can afford to be encircled by Baltic states, Poland, Finland from one side, Ukraine is still fighting, and what's happened if some country like Kazakhstan, for example, say, okay, Putin here on
Revolts. Does a revolt.
yeah. So
It's just
he's taken up Kievka for 9 months. So how he's planning
right.
to fight all
Exactly.
together?
My point exactly. The logistics demands on on trying to invade additional states when he can't even conquer or subdue a single state, in this case, Ukraine. Yeah, he cannot threaten additional offensive actions without overstraining his economy, and particularly if President Trump and Saudi Arabia's efforts to drop the price of oil, increase oil production, drop the price of oil to such a state that the Russians cannot realistically expect to continue they cannot continue to finance it. It would bankrupt their system in order to do it. And so, there are now even signs internally in the Russian economy of increased inflation, increased economic disruption and shortages for the Russian people. That is going to make itself felt within the Russian populace, particularly if Putin is forced to conscript Russians themselves, the main Russian population. He is, we have noticed he has studiously avoided that up to this point as much as he could. But it is rapidly approaching the point where Putin will be unable to avoid that, and he will be forced into that Zugzwang that you and I have discussed. Yeah. He's going to be confronted with Zugzwang. He will have no good moves left, and no matter which way he goes, the results will be unpleasant. So right now, the question becomes is when is that culminating point that Clausewitz discussed, that culminating point where the attacker has reached the limit of his offensive capability and opens up an opportunity for a decisive counterattack by the defender. And Ukraine, as we have noted, is steadily growing stronger militarily, economically, diplomatically. They are doing quite well. Yes. And so they are gaining an increasing capability to, at a moment of their choosing, sometime in hopefully the near future, but we'll settle for a 2 or 3 months, a summer counteroffensive if need be, that Ukraine can go beyond just the local counterattacks into the Kursk Oblast, and counterattacks against the Russians in eastern Ukraine. And I am still looking for, with anticipation, a decisive counteroffensive that would seal off Crimea, and then, with strategic reserves that Kiev hopefully will have created, be able to invade the Crimea and force the surrender of the Russian occupiers, who by that time will be cut off from supply and reinforcement. That is the key. And that is why I continue to believe to this for over a year or so, but especially now, that the Crimea is the true center of gravity of this entire conflict. And if Ukraine can successfully recover the control of the Crimea, that will be pretty much done for Russia.
Yeah, I think Ukraine now realizing also that as much as they could achieve on the front lines, they could achieve perhaps even more diplomatically, because Russia is now being isolated. There is no ally who support Russian position, not even China or India or just anybody, because they
want nothing to do with it.
Because China is aggressor, and you cannot hide it for long. Everybody understands that. So in this case, Zelensky is playing for time. See, now time, interestingly enough, is on his side. It's Putin, what's his name, Peskov, his spokesman. Now he says that the meeting between Trump and Putin is unavoidable. It has to be done as soon as possible. What was Trump's reply? Zero, nothing. You never heard about that?
Yep.
Unavoidable? What's unavoidable?
Really?
There were meetings, several meetings in Saudi Arabia.
Basically, Trump's reply would be something along the lines of, "You ignored us then. Why should we pay attention to you now?"
Okay, have your own meetings. And
yes. Enjoy meeting with yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Lavrov meeting Putin, and all those other high-ranked people will meet each other and discuss it. I think there was a time, many years ago, there was one, it was about a couple 100 kilometers from Toronto, Belleville, Ontario. There was one real estate guy. He acquired the properties a few years ago, and now real estate market started to do really well. And he wanted to sell it for $4 million. And there was no offers, though, and he was still insisting, and then he lowered it to $3 million. There were still no offers, nothing, though. He was sitting there and so on. And finally he decided that, okay, you know what, enough is enough. I really need to sell it. He sold it, for how much? $150,000. Going down from $4 million. They think this is a lesson to Mr. Putin. You were offered so much, almost anything you didn't even ask for. Oh, you wanted even more. It was not enough. It was not good enough. Okay, So now all of a sudden there are no offers. Are there any offers, Mr. Putin, coming to you? No. So what's happening? Oh, now you're saying this, that the meeting is now a must, it's unavoidable. It has to be held as soon as possible. What meeting? Where meeting? What are we talking about? Just get your army out of Ukraine, and maybe then that would be a condition for a meeting. Okay, Mr. Putin.
Is it because President Trump will have learned by then that okay, time to forge a really hard deal. He had previously said we can do this the easy way or we can do this the
Yeah,
hard way.
exactly.
So he does. He is capable of understanding. He certainly is capable. Shown he is capable of understanding when it's time to change the terms of the deal. It will be a new wrinkle. It'll be a new wrinkle for him, but he's not incapable of learning, and he can then drive a very hard deal and say, okay, you turned down the easy way. Now it's time for the hard way.
Yeah, well, you can still call it a deal. That's probably what Trump likes. Use this word more
Well,
than
some in the West,
down to ultimatum at the end of the day.
we in the West, in the United States, we call that a raw deal.
Oh yeah,
A raw deal. Yeah. If you instead of give someone a raw deal, they just got a deal on very bad terms.
exactly. Well, with that, Jonathan, I would like to thank you so much for today's program. Have a great weekend, and all our
Yes.
listeners. And we'll see you on Tuesday, same place, same time.
Yes.
Okay?
Excellent.
Thank you.
God bless America.
Glory to Ukraine. Bye bye, everybody.